2017, Anahata Chakra. Anahata means incessantly beating. It's the center, the energy ball that is incessantly beating, which it literally does. The cause of the heartbeat is the pulsation of the causal body. The causal body is exactly what causal means. It is the cause behind your existence. So that is the original energy ball that started condensing and eventually turned into matter, or the physical body that you exist of. It also reflects karma. So the theory goes, or the idea goes in yoga philosophy, that it is because of karma that you are born. When all karma has burned up, there's no need to be reborn, to be reincarnated. So we talked about this from another perspective before. Buddhism goes out from the point of view that you need to live through 1,000,000 lives to burn all your karma and reach paradise again, return to paradise. It's also related to karma. And the more karma you burn, of course, which is the goal of yoga, Buddhism, the less you have to suffer through all those lives. So the approach to that is very practical. You're being born and you suffer because you have karma. So the most practical way to deal with that is consciousness, which yoga preeminently is designed to offer us, awakening of consciousness, so that we stop living subconsciously and making the same mistake again and again, not only in this life, but life after life. The heart chakra, for us, is very important for several reasons. It is the first chakra that lies above the diaphragm. Below the diaphragm lie our lower emotions and desires. The heart chakra is the chakra that is reached, touched, or awakened when we breach the diaphragm. And I, from my own experience, can tell you this happens already in the beginning of your yoga practice. It's nothing mysterious, nothing hard to obtain. It happens quite soon after you start practicing yoga. Simply because yoga done correctly leads to energy rising up, and it is that what is responsible for breaching that glass ceiling that in untrained people remains an obstacle. The other reason why the heart chakra is important is because it is reflecting the contents of the crown chakra. The crown chakra has no physical existence, no physical existence. It's manifesting through the heart. Now if you look at the illustration on the right side at the bottom, you see the heart chakra there, including a couple of symbolical representations of the heart chakra. One of them is the Star of David, as we know it from Judaism, which has direct links with Eastern philosophies and religion. The Star of David exists out of two triangles. One triangle is pointing up, which symbolizes, of course, Shakti energy. The other triangle is pointing down, which of course, represents Shiva energy descending. Why in the heart? The ultimate goal of yoga is Ananda, pure bliss. And bliss is love. The ultimate goal is that we open the heart and live from the heart, function from the heart. That means you function based on love, compassion. The significance of the Star of David in the heart is as follows. A normal, untrained person has a heart, but the presence of the heart is not so big. As a result of yoga practice, the presence of the heart becomes stronger and stronger. What the Star of David is representing is similar to the yin-yang model. It represents harmony. It is an indication of the heart manifesting when Shiva and Shakti are in equal amounts in the heart. When there is sattva in the heart. A normal human being has the center of gravity of consciousness below the diaphragm. Shiva flows in without effort. That is why we have a tendency to gravitate towards the bottom. Shakti energy, however, requires effort. You have to move. Any kind of movement we know, but any kind of movement means no control, and this balance will not occur. But when you practice yoga correctly, you generate Shakti, but in a measured way. By standing still, by doing your practice in silence. So the energy that you make rise up will then balance with the Shiva energy that comes in unimpeded, unrestricted. So you work, but you work in a controlled way, allowing Shakti to rise. And that leads to that phenomenon of the heart chakra opening. And if you practice yoga correctly, that happens from the very beginning that you start practicing yoga. It's just that it's not just such a big phenomenon in the beginning, but you do feel that you become more sensitive, more caring, and more conscious, which all reflects the crown chakra through the heart. Also, symbol in this same drawing is a deer. A deer is a very, very sensitive animal. When it sleeps, its sleep is very shallow. Its eyes maybe even open. And at the slightest crack of a twig, it is alert and will flee. The deer represents alertness. Why? Because when you live from the heart and you are more sensitive and conscious, above average, you're also very open to hurt. You're very vulnerable. So it is very important that we are alert to what we allow to enter our consciousness, our mind, our system. But it doesn't only apply to the outside, it also applies to the inside, and maybe in the beginning even more importantly so. It applies to how we function subconsciously. Because of our subconscious functioning, we act based on impulses. We react towards coincidental situations, circumstances that we find ourselves in. And as yogis, that becomes more and more destabilizing. It becomes more and more harmful. You deal with that in the first place by being conscious of the subconscious, which naturally happens in your moments of standing still. And of course, meditation is the most powerful tool to turn subconscious functioning into conscious functioning. There is a third symbol at the bottom of that drawing, and it shows a tree. Now, what does a tree have to do with the heart? The heart chakra has a secondary chakra, a satellite, that is called Kalpataru. Kalpataru chakra. Kalpataru is the wishing tree, the tree of the wish. And it symbolically represents the ability to make wishes come true. Making wishes come true is truly possible. But it does adhere to certain universal laws. It has to be in line with the yamas and the niyamas. It requires vision, because a wish is often something that deep inside you know is not possible now. So it requires vision of where in the future it might manifest and what needs to be done to manifest. Because wishes do not manifest without our active participation. There is an expression in English that says, God helps only those who help themselves. That applies here. I have shared from my own experience the process, basically the process of my life after I discovered yoga. And it is basically about manifesting wishes. I told you how it took me 9 years to come to Korea. That was an obsession, something that I could not let go of. I told you also that my Hapkido buddies, within the first year of our Hapkido teacher leaving, they came to Korea. But within a year, they all returned back to their old life. For me, I had this wish. I wanted to go to Korea. The underlying excuse, it sounds funny, but the underlying excuse was to continue my pursuit of the practice of Hapkido. But that was only a tool, if I look back. The essence of what was going on was I needed to get out of my environment, detach from my environment, but I also needed challenges and obstacles. I needed a walkabout. like the Australians do, the indigenous people in Australia, they go on a walkabout when they grow up as a ritual of adulthood. I needed to prove myself, not to anybody but myself. It's a totally different energy, idea, than my other Hapkido buddies. So it took me 9 years to prepare. But in those 9 years, I fulfilled the vision that came with it. And it meant that I had to go there. It was not just a matter of having some spare money, like my Hapkido buddies, but there were so many other things involved for me that didn't matter to them. It explains why I'm still here after 24 years. And that Hapkido is totally irrelevant, not important anymore. Fulfilling of a wish means to carry the wish in your heart and you daydream about it. You cherish. Every time you think about it, it doesn't frustrate you, it doesn't make you unhappy. On the contrary, it makes you enthusiastic. It fills you with joy. Even when you think it is nearly impossible to ever be achieved. But it fuels you. It makes everything in life worthwhile. All your struggles and everything. So a wish can be anything, but it has to come from the heart. Everybody can say, for example, I want to be rich. And it is possible to get rich based on a wish. It really is. There is nothing ugly or dirty about that, as many New Age people tend to think. But the reason why you want to get rich is important. Is that wish pure? Is there a pure motivation behind it? Or is it pure greed? If it is pure greed, it's still possible, but then you'll only come across lots of obstacles, failures, and misery. Conflicts also with the people that are part of that road that you are on to fulfill that wish. That is why the deer is important, that you are alert towards your underlying motives that are the origin of the wish. Courage is a very important quality you need to fulfill wishes because it requires overcoming obstacles and challenges that people without courage would simply avoid. It requires facing the unknown. Human beings are psychologically not very well equipped to deal with the unknown. So like challenges and obstacles, we tend to avoid it if we can. And it requires a lot of patience. And patience is only possible if you have vision. Because when you have vision, you see before you the process that you need to go through that will allow you to eventually, in the long term, to end up where you want to be, to manifest your wish. No surprise that these qualities are in fact qualities of the crown chakra and therefore of the heart. The crown chakra is where we have vision. The crown chakra is where courage is located, the total opposite of fear in Muladhara chakra. So a very significant chakra altogether. And when I came to Korea in the very first years, because of needing to find my way and discovering a whole new world and society, I was invited to people's homes and visited people's homes along the way, and I noticed, in contrast with the situation in the Netherlands, in Korea, when people identify themselves with being a Christian, most of them have a picture at the entrance of the house with Jesus Christ with a burning heart. And that burning heart is symbolism of a person who functions from the heart. So very appropriate for yoga practitioners. Jesus Christ was in fact an advanced yogi, or he was on his way to Buddhahood or sainthood, you can say. Every yoga practitioner is on that same road. There is nothing mysterious about that. Jesus was just a normal human being, and if you dig a little bit deeper into who he really was, you find indeed that he has tendencies of a yogi. Because the stories go that he was not so much a saint, but a rebel. He was rebellious. He stood up against what he felt was wrong. He stood up against authority. He did things that normal people can't do because of lacking courage. And he sacrificed, in fact, his life, standing up for principles. You will find yourself more and more in that corner too. Becoming more stubborn, which is maybe better replaced by steadfastness, stubborn. I always say with a smile, because my mom used to call me a bulldozer because of my stubbornness. It's a quality of a yogi. But the yogi also has a tendency towards radicalism. That is a temporary stage that you go through before the heart takes over. And Jesus was known for his radicalism. The burning heart. Burning heart is a phenomenon that at some point after some years of yoga practice you may experience yourself. It's a breathtaking experience. It's wonderful, but it's also very unstable the moment that you experience a burning heart. Because energy is inherently unstable. It is accompanied by a huge release of energy. The subtle element of the chakra is air. The karmandriya, subtle vehicle of action, is grasp. Grasp with your hands, grabbing things. That's what babies do. From the moment they're born, they want to grab things. Preferably your finger, your hand, your hair. They want to touch. Hence, teddy bears, for example. Very, very comforting for a baby, because the touch of that fluffy, soft thing creates sattva in the heart chakra. And as an adult, I have 2 dogs. It does the same as a teddy bear. It feeds your heart.
And dogs also like teddy bears.
What?
Dogs also like teddy bears. Soft toys.
Basically, yes. With the difference is that they have a beating heart, they are warm, they communicate. Subtle organ of perception, the Jnanendriya, is touch. No surprise. In line with grasp, in line with what I just told you about touching soft and comfortable things that lead to sattva in the heart chakra. So the Jnanendriya is touch. The whole skin basically is the organ of perception. The subtle energy is Udana Prana. Udana Prana is responsible for the human being straight, upright. Udana Prana works like a hot air balloon. You have a hot air balloon, you pump in a lot of hot air, burning gas, then the balloon starts to rise, and eventually it will lift up the basket that hangs under it with cargo in it or with 10, 15 people in it. It erects. So people who slouch, people who go through life bent, literally, physically bent, they are lacking Udana Prana. And one of the things that happened to most yoga practitioners also from the very beginning is that you become straighter. I heard in the first year that I practiced yoga, I heard regularly people saying, "Hey, you are straighter than before." Have you had people saying that to you? That your posture became more straight? Literally. But that is caused by increasing Udana Prana. If you practice regularly, you become simply straighter. Also, you feel lighter. When you walk up the stairs, instead of one step at a time, you take 2 steps at a time. You feel lighter, physically lighter, because of Udana Prana lifting you up. It feels like you're walking on springs, on feathers, on clouds. The color green for the heart chakra, and there's also a mantra is Yam. Now the functions of the heart chakra, higher desires. So below the diaphragm we have lower emotions and desires. Here we have higher emotions and desires. There's a distinction. Love and hate, both in the same basket. Sympathy, empathy, vocation, finding your thing in life based on what you feel attracted to. And of course, love. And love and hate also means love with the opposite phenomenon of a broken heart. And if you've ever suffered a broken heart, you know that that is very serious business, that your heart truly actually can break. Now, we talked about yoga, how many kinds of yoga are there? And I told you there is only one, but there is the belief that there is Bhakti Yoga. And I have to...
Bhakti Yoga?
Yes. I have to tell you something about this, because that is not a form of yoga, as some teachers want you to believe. It is a stage of development. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of serving, servitude, surrender, sacrifice. But then you go to a yoga institute and the teacher tells you, we start with Bhakti Yoga to test your humility. So here you have a bucket and a mop. Please start cleaning the floor. And when you're done, you can start cleaning the windows. That is absolutely not Bhakti Yoga. That is abuse. Bhakti Yoga is a stage everybody goes through. What does it mean? You naturally want to serve. You naturally want to help. You feel people in need, you naturally want to help. You want to do something about other people suffering, other people being needy or helpless. It is a very natural stage. Because your heart is opening up. You start to care about the environment. You start to care about other beings. Not only human beings, but also animals. You start to feel the pain when you watch the news. People on the other side of the world living in a war zone or experiencing famine. You start to care about these things. Well, before it didn't really touch you that much. That is Bhakti Yoga. It is for this reason that I never ask people to help me. And you know why? Because it doesn't feel pure. People have helped me. These files, they have been edited, and the editor has put very nice illustrations there. But it was one of my students who one day said, "Hey Ron, would you like it if I start editing your files? And when I'm done with it, I will share it with you so you can use them for your future classes?" So I said, "Yes, wonderful." But there is no impurity there. I never asked. And it became his project. And it allowed him to, beside coming to class, it allowed him to go much deeper into the matter. He saw it in that way. And it was something that took him several years to complete, because he also did all the files of the advanced course. I've never asked. Wonderful. Then I have all the files in Korean. Somebody translated those. I've always had the wish to have the text translated into Korean, but I never asked. One day a student who started teaching Raja Yoga herself, the only student that I have who actually started teaching Raja Yoga, following the same framework as we do, offered to translate all the files into Korean for herself, for her own purpose, because she was teaching Korean people, she is Korean, but she offered to share them with me. So I said, wonderful. Now this is what happened. Several years later, some small conflict occurred, because I heard her students also come to me because they want to come closer to the source from where she's from. So students from her that speak English, that understand English, they have a tendency to want to come to me and learn deeper. So I heard stories about things that she does in her studio. And one of the things that she does was, she would say, every Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock, we have counseling sessions. And she would then sit behind the desk, and people would come to her like a patient at a psychiatrist and talk about problems. But what I learned, she's not a qualified psychologist, and what I learned from the stories that I heard is that it actually caused people more distress. Because her ego made her feel important. I can solve your problems. I will help you solve your problems. Just open up, put it all on the table, and I will help you. And that is the opposite of what you should do. And a qualified psychologist knows that. Because it gives people the idea they have problems, maybe even more than they originally have. We all have problems, of course, but if there is somebody who starts to acknowledge that and even exacerbate it, make it bigger than it is, it does harm. And so I contacted her. I contacted her and I addressed the issue. And her first reaction was, of course, totally understandable, kind of upset. How did you know about this? That was the first question. How do you know all about this? And the next thing was, but I translated all those files for you. In other words, you can't criticize me. You can't do this for me because I did something for you. And then she quickly swallowed that because she realized it was not pure. And that confirmed to me that she's a real yogi. You understand what I'm saying? I didn't even have to say, but I never asked you to do that. Because she realized herself. And that for me was the proof that she was a yogi. We have a very good relationship. Because she overcame that ego very quick, which yogis have the quality to do. And we just understand each other more deeply. And she basically agreed with that what she was doing is basically not correct. Okay. When sattva dominates in the chakra, the vehicle of observation is in touch with the skin, which is the organ of perception. In sattva, it manifests itself as the heart. When there is Shakti domination, the vehicle of motion is grasp. The chakra manifests as a thymus gland. And when there is Shiva domination, when tamas prevails, the subtle element is air. All gases are symbolically air, and it manifests as the vertebra in the upper back. There are stories of yogis who, maybe Kira knows that even better, but there are yogis who have themselves buried, literally buried, for days, sometimes weeks, and even in extreme cases for months at a time. Why would they do something like this? As an outsider, it may seem like they are bragging about being special. But what it really is about is to establish the quality of the yoga master. The yoga master, by doing inhumane things, inhuman things, by doing things that for normal people would lead to death, is not showing off, is not bragging, is basically a test. These people survive unharmed because they have control over the heartbeat. And it's not such a strange idea because there are animals who actually do the same in a natural way, as an instinct. They go into hibernation for a couple of months during the winter. I've never tried. My heartbeat in rest is usually very low, close to 50. But I've never tried to control the heartbeat or make it come to an almost standstill or so. I think if you focus very hard on it, you can, like the traditional yogis prove. But for me, that is not necessary or superficial thing to do. I'd like to focus on the modern day of teaching, and I have nothing to prove other than teaching well. You see a picture there next to that piece of text that deals with that issue, that is actually not really related to the heart chakra, but it's actually a fakir. And fakirs, not many people have heard of fakirs, but I grew up with as a child, fakir is somebody who sleeps on a bed of nails. A very thin, emaciated person. You see the ribs, but sleeping on a bed of nails, that is a fakir. A fakir, that is one of those members of the sect that the Buddha joined after he left the luxury of his palace. Very super austere. All luxury, including their clothes, thrown off and living on sheer minimum, even to the point that it's harmful, damaging. As the Buddha, after some years living with them, came to the conclusion. Now, of course, we have to talk about love. Unconditional love, to be precise, which is very difficult. Love in general, in most cases, especially where it comes to relationships, love relationships, is always conditional. Unconditional love means that you are totally independent, that there is not a material need to be with that person, and that basically you are able and willing to let that person go, that person that you love most, to let that person go if that is what is needed for that person's further development. But when we talk about development, we don't talk about career. We talk about spirit. And it is spirit that dies first in most conditional relationships. That is why we are always so unhappy when we are stuck in a relationship. It starts with a lot of enthusiasm. When you fall in love, you feel like walking on a cloud. You feel like with your head in heaven. If you've ever experienced falling in love. But soon after that, if the relationship materializes, the misery starts. Because there are expectations. There is miscommunication or lack of communication. Because suspicion, Muladhara Chakra kicks in. When you fall in love, you feel like in heaven because all your energy is here. Your heart is wide open. But you're only human. Your other chakras do not cease to exist. And when the relationship materializes, you come back with your feet down to earth, and fear, Muladhara Chakra, activates, which is natural and human, but it happens subconsciously, and that is where the trouble starts. Because it's natural that when you have something precious, you don't want to lose it. But because this happens in a subconscious way, you start looking at the object of your love, the person you have fallen in love with, you now start looking at with suspicion. Who were you talking with on the phone or sending text messages to? Where were you? I tried to call you and you didn't answer your phone. Who were you with? Suspicion. And you know what? Sometimes that suspicion is maybe even justified. But the thing is, it shouldn't bother you too much. It can bother you, of course, but it shouldn't bother you too much. Unconditional love means to allow the object of your love to manifest. Now, if that leads to infidelity, you may have to come to the conclusion that you're not in the right relationship. But you understand. If that's what needed for that person to manifest further, to evolve further, Your heart is so big that you will say, I understand, I will let you go. You must do what you have to do. This is really, really difficult. You trust that the universe knows what's best for you. If it is meant to be, if it is really meant to be, he or she will come back to the nest. The irony is that because of our fears, because of our conditional love, the chance that that person will come back to the nest is smaller because it leads to conflict. So it's easy to talk about this. It's very, very difficult to put into practice. So all we can do is our best. And be conscious of these fears, trying to put a spanner into the wheels, trying to sabotage things. You know the devil, the image of the devil, which is a person with goat feet, goat hooves, and horns. I'm starting to grow horns. And a pitchfork, trident, and a tail. You know what this devil is? You understand where that symbol of the devil comes from? It's what we're talking about here. Those 3 lower chakras. The devil is not an outside entity. It's here. It's in your belly, your deepest fears and mistrust and worries and doubts and desires. That is what the devil symbolizes. Just be aware of it. We all possess these self-destructive qualities within ourselves. It's only human. We function like that. If you become aware of it, if you have the alertness of the deer, so that you intercept those negative emotions, you can then try to get a handle on it. You can then try to avoid the destruction that it tries to cause. So, be human, but be alert. And fears are a signal. Very often they are not warranted. They're just very deeply ingrained instincts, fear instincts that are based on tens of thousands of years of evolution. But sometimes fears do indicate that there is something improper. So just pay attention and try to stay rational. You will see that those fears, especially those that are stirred up in a relationship when you fall in love, are often triggered by childhood experiences, fear of abandonment and what have you. So from whatever point of view you look at it, it's always a positive experience. If you draw your lessons from it, if you learn what it is trying to tell you about yourself, about your past, and sometimes about your partner. Unconditional love is something that women generally are better at than men, because women raise kids mainly, and children raising children is all about sacrifice. Hoping something in return, but it is all about sacrifice. The moms always stay loyal to their kids, even when their kids mess up. That's what moms do. Good. Heart chakra. Questions about the heart chakra? Okay. Let's have a short break.